All right. Well, thank you for coming in today. We are here for week 3 of the National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Um, for those of you who have been following along, this is our third week. And today we are going to be going into job and internship search. So I want to introduce our topic and introduce our team today. So, myself, I am a career specialist here. I cover the South region of ACC's district. My name's John Alderson. And then we have the rest of our team from the SAS department, if you'd like to introduce yourself briefly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chinwendu Okoronkwo Burns, and I'm one of three regional directors for Access and Disability Support, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Good morning. My name is Drew Logan, and I am the SAS advocate at the Eastview campus.
All right, we'll continue on. So, the reason we're here today is to help you learn how to get ready for a job search. Job search is a very individualized pursuit. It's something that we would generally meet with students one on one to help them out. But there are some common themes and common threads that we want to explore today. I also want to introduce you to some tools, including especially our job board handshake, to help you better, perform your job search when it's time to start looking for that. And I'm going to use it pretty interchangeably throughout this for a job or an internship because the process of looking and searching and applying is very similar. You may use slightly different tools, but the process is very much the same. So I want to make sure by the time we're done today, everybody understands where to start planning your job search, how to use especially Handshake to get ready to, improve your job search, and then know some of the other resources out there available to you when you need to conduct a job search. So, one of the key components of getting ready for a job search is knowing yourself. You need to be able to reflect on you and your abilities and what you need to really successfully get a job search done. Otherwise, you may have much more trouble finding something. It may not be the best fit for you. There's a lot of reasons. So, a few of the things you may want to talk about, or think about, sorry, is making sure to review yourself, your strengths, your skills. What are my experiences? You may even delve into things like what are some of my interests and values. Those are all really good to make sure that you, one, find a job that's a good fit for you, and two, make sure that it's a good fit for the job. You want to make sure that you align with what the job needs and what you need. So it's really good to explore some of your personal options. What are your options available and open to you? What are your needs? So you want to make sure you're looking in the right place. Where do I want to work location wise? When are you available to work? If you're a student, um, you may have to work around that. If you have a family, you may have to work around some of those scheduling concerns. Location is another thing too. If you have to work around a bus route, um, how comfortable are you with commuting if you have a car? Those are all different types of things that you want to consider. Even what type of environment works well for you. Do I want something very fast paced around a lot of people? Would I prefer something much quieter, much more in a maybe one working on your own sort of setting? Those are all things you need to know when you're getting ready for the job search. It's also good to make sure you're clarifying what are you trying to get from this. Obviously, most people need employment for money reasons or maybe experience reasons, but it's a good idea to know what you're trying to get from a job. What are you trying to achieve with it? Is it just a paycheck? Sometimes we call them a survival job. Or is this something for advancing my career? Do I need to get a certain type of experience in this process of attaining a job that would influence where you're looking and what you're looking for? One thing I also want to encourage, and this kind of goes back to reviewing your strengths and skills, make sure to build your confidence. You can't go into a job search from a position of worrying about, am I good enough? Do I have the right skills? What you really want to do is approach it from your strengths, making sure that you are showcasing those abilities, um, reflecting on what you contribute as a potential employer, what you bring to the table. It's going to be really important. And being proud about that, making sure you're feeling confident to showcase that. So overall, making sure that you have just a good, solid plan to make sure what kind of job do I need? What are some of the logistics that I need to ensure when I'm looking? And what am I trying to showcase about myself? Real quick, I'll pause. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague to describe a little bit of things that may be specific if anybody does have things like accommodations or disabilities that also factor into your job search. Chinwindu?
Thank you, John. So, throughout this process, again, John just mentioned having that confidence, right? And if you identify as being a student or a person with a disability, he mentioned again that aspect of confidence. And one way to bolster that is to really understand your rights as it relates to this job search process and as you navigate having your first interview, your first few interviews, and whether or not you decide to accept that job. So knowing those rights can help bolster that confidence. And excuse me, part of those rights would be understanding the American with Disabilities Act and how it applies to the employment side of the house. So what we know is Title I is designed to ensure people with disabilities access the same employment opportunities and benefits that's available to people without disabilities. It's important to note that employers must provide reasonable accommodations to qualified applicants or employees. And some examples of some particular accommodations might be, let's say if you accept the job, it could be a change to the layout of the workspace. It could be use of assistive technology, accessible communications, such as having a sign language interpreter. That might be an accommodation that's used for the interview process and even as you accept that job, or it could be changes to some of the policies, right? Do we need to shift or change your work schedule to allow time to go to doctor's appointments? And it could be an adjustment to the job application itself. So, for instance, is that job application accessible? Do you need accessible documents? Or if you move forward to that interview process, do you need breaks in the interview process? Or if they're providing documents, again, making sure those are accessible. Next slide, please. Another law that we have that can help bolster that confidence by just knowing what your rights are would be that Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Now, it's important to know that this was one of the first laws, disability rights laws that was put in place, and it protects individuals with disabilities from harassment based on disability. It also extends out to federal contractors. So those who also do business with the federal government are also prohibited from discriminating against employees with disabilities or even in that application process. And they're also required, the federal government and those that contract with the federal government, to take proactive steps, right, to recruit, hire, retain, and even train individuals with disabilities, right? So within that federal sector, there may be specific programs that are designated for people with disabilities. And that's another way to be able to bolster your confidence in this job search process. So as you're looking for a job and as you're doing that job search, it is important to consider what are some of the things you might need personally, right? Consider the work environment that you might need. What type of workspace helps you thrive? Do you think you need a remote role, something in person? Do you need an environment that's quiet or something that's a little bit more engaging and fast-paced? Do you need a position that allows you to manage your own schedule and you have a lot of flexibility, or do you need a role that has more predictive tasks so you know what your day-to-day will be? Do you need a job that allows for more natural breaks, something that allows you to go at your own pace, again, or something that's a little bit more engaging and fast-paced where your duties might change from day to day? You might consider your overall career goals and your own personal goals, right? What type of work feels meaningful and sustainable to you? Are you pursuing a career that aligns with your own interests, your values, and your own capabilities? And you also may want to consider as you're going through that job search process, are you looking for something that's more long term or a stepping stone? So that might be an internship, a fellowship, really honing in on what you're looking for at the moment to help build your overall experience. Some considerations for companies as you're applying is, do you want to be a part of a company that forwardly embraces neurodiversity or accessibility? Is that apparent on their website? Do they have employee resource groups? You also want to consider your own support systems, right? As you're navigating the job search, do you need support from your own systems to be able to provide assistance? Maybe they can look at your resume, or once you move forward in that job search process and you have an interview and you accept the job, again, what type of support systems do you have to support you in that workplace? Whether that's friends, family, a vocational rehabilitation counselor, just consider who your supports are and what you might need. And then consider your accommodation needs. Do you have any specific accommodation needs? And is there anything that you would like to disclose? Next slide, please. So if you do consider disclosing that you have a disability or that you need accommodations, please know that it is completely a personal choice. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no one size fit all answers. It is personalized to you as far as what works best for you. That's going to be dependent upon your own individual needs, what your goals are, what you feel comfortable with, and what the job requirements are. And if accommodations are needed at different stages throughout the job search process, maybe you might need accommodations after you accept the job offer, but you may not need accommodations during the application phase, right? So you also may want to consider if accommodations are needed throughout various stages. Before you disclose, and if you decide that's something that's right for you, again, you want to understand your rights. That ADA, the Rehabilitation Act that we went over, understand why you are disclosing. What is the sole purpose and the goal of your disclosure? Consider the timing of your disclosure, and I'll go over some various aspects where one may decide to disclose, again, if that's right for you. Okay. You would also want to determine again what to disclose. How much information is too much information, or how much information is just the right amount of information to disclose. Consider the work environment, right? And is the environment already set up in a way that maybe you have access to what you need, or maybe you do need accommodations? I'll give an example. I have a family member that worked at a job, and they had a cabinet full of assistive technology and different types of furniture. And for some people, they didn't need to disclose that they had a disability as far as the physical items that they needed. They could just go to the cabinet, grab the items that they needed, or they could send in a work order request and request the items that they needed. And that was available for everyone. So again, thinking about that work environment and whether or not you need to disclose, because that flexibility and that accessibility could be built into the process. Should you decide to disclose, you may want to plan out how you will disclose, right? Who you will disclose to. You definitely want to look at the company's accommodation process because there could be specific forms that you need to fill out, a time frame that you need to meet, meetings that you'll need to have, such as that interactive process. And you definitely want to practice that self-advocacy, right? Like speaking for yourself, describing how you're going to meet all of the job functions and where you just need a little bit of that additional support, and have in mind some accommodations that might work for you. In terms of when to disclose, again, if you feel like that's something that's right for you, some areas where one might choose to disclose might be on the job application, right? That might be identifying on that application that you are an individual with a disability. Something to consider is that if you disclose, there could be specific disability hiring programs. Again, I mentioned how the federal government typically has some hiring initiatives, right? So that could be something that you're eligible for. It could show your self-advocacy, but you also have to consider that it could reveal that you have a disability if you're self-disclosing before you've had an opportunity to really explain your strengths. You could disclose before an interview, and you could do that by asking questions about the hiring process. You could notify the recruiter in advance of any accommodations that you might need in the interview process. It ensures that you have those accommodations in place, right? Maybe you need extra breaks during the interview. Maybe you need to break the interview up into sections. It signals the professionalism because you're coming forward and you're stating specifically what you're needing. It helps them structure the interview in an accessible way. Let's say you need an interpreter or accessible documents. It gives them that time to get those together. But something to consider is it could cause the hiring committee to have natural questions about how you might meet those job duties. Now, are they supposed to, ask specifically about if you have a disability? No, but they could throw in some tricky questions. So that's something to consider. You might just consider disclosing during the interview. You could bring that up naturally as you're answering those interview questions if you feel like that is appropriate for you. It allows for that direct conversation about how you can handle the job, how you can meet the skills of that job, and how you're the best candidate for that role. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate problem-solving skills and the skills that you bring to the table that makes you the right fit for the role. But something to consider is it could shift the focus and the tone of the interview. You could also decide to disclose after you receive the job interview. Maybe the applications, the interview process was accessible to you, but maybe there's specific things that you know that you need in order to be successful in the role. So after you receive that job offer, that might be a time that you decide to disclose. It allows for planning in advance. It shows that they selected you because they know you're the right candidate for the role, which is what they should be considering in the first place. It could feel safer for you to disclose at this particular time because a job offer has been extended, but it could cause those natural questions about whether or not those job duties can be met. But you've had that successful interview and you were able to demonstrate that you're the right candidate for the role. But those questions could pop up. You could consider disclosing after you have started your job. You could work a few weeks, get a feel for the environment, and then decide if you need to disclose and request any accommodations. It allows you maximum control over your privacy and what information you want individuals to know. And something to consider is after you have worked in that role for a little bit, it could allow you time again to know what the full requirements of that particular role is, because sometimes what's written on the job application and your job descriptions sometimes can be a little bit different from the day to day. So again, it allows you to really know what the full aspect of that role and job is going to be before you decide to disclose and whether or not those accommodations are right for you. Or you can decide you never need to disclose. Maybe that job is flexible for you, it's just right, and you may decide that there's no need for you to disclose. Um, And that again is a personal choice. Overall, disclosing is a personal choice. Again, there's no one size, fits all. There's no one right answer. It is about what is the right answer for you. It's about your needs, your personal goals, your professional goals, what you feel comfortable with. And you could find that you may disclose at one job and you may not disclose at another. You might disclose on one application, you may not disclose on another. It's very fluid.
Chinwendu, just to draw attention again to one of the items that you were discussing, if you are an individual who is considering disclosing, I would encourage you to pay special attention to researching the company's accommodation process. First, because that might help you determine if it seems like the type of environment in which you want to disclose, if you feel like there are accommodations that would be helpful for you. But
Mhm.
also because in understanding what exactly the employer would require from you in terms of documentation may also contribute to your decision to disclose. So for example, if the employer has a form, like a templated form that you would provide to your medical doctor or to your provider to fill out, that might be a situation where you feel more comfortable in disclosing because only the exact required information would be asked of you on that document. So it's not a situation where you're submitting additional information, maybe from a medical provider, that has more information in it than what might be required in that particular instance. Obviously, it's a very personal choice, as Chinwendu has been talking about, to disclose. And if you do decide to disclose, we want to make sure that you're in a situation where you're only giving information to your employer that you feel comfortable in sharing. So you'll want to make sure that you're really researching their particular process, their individualized process on requesting accommodations in the workplace.
Absolutely, Drew. Thank you so much for sharing that information because that leads right to the next slide. And that is really getting to know the process, Drew, as you were mentioning, right? Understanding that interactive process, understanding the company's culture towards disability. Do they promote accessibility? Is it built into some of their systems? Getting a good understanding about how the company views disability and accessibility, that may clue you in as to when you want to disclose or how you may want to disclose. Reflect on your needs and the task where support is needed. So if you decide that accommodations are needed, be very specific about what you are wanting to share, keeping in mind that you can limit information and be as specific as you're needing to be. Understand what reasonable accommodations are. What is reasonable for one company may not be reasonable for next, but there is a definition about what reasonable accommodations are. And you're just wanting to understand what might be right for you. Consider what accommodations have worked for you in the past. There may be some accommodations that you know that you have that are tried and true, and that these are the accommodations that you will need to help meet those the essential functions of the role that you are applying for. You definitely want to review the job description. That will give you a lot of insight into what will be expected of you, and that will also help you determine what type of accommodations might be needed. I would encourage you, if you decide to disclose, to please review that accommodation process. Every company will have a different process. Some of it could mirror. We don't want to assume that one process will be the same as another company. So please review their accommodation process because it may tell you who you need to submit the paperwork to, how long the process may take, and what happens after those reasonable accommodations have been decided on. Know why you are disclosing and consider all of your options. Again, does disclosing help you get to your own personal or professional goals? What is the overall goal and purpose of you disclosing that you have a disability? I'll give an example for myself. I have asthma, but for this particular role that I have, I don't necessarily, I'm just sharing it with you all, but I don't necessarily need to ask for accommodations for my employer because I have asthma. Now, at one point in time, my major was athletic training. So if I was out there running and training athletes, right, I might need some accommodations, especially if I noticed that my asthma was flaring up. I might need to take a break in order to be able to have to use my inhaler and to wait for things to settle down, right? So I may not need accommodations in this particular role, but in another one, I might. So consider why you are disclosing and consider your options. Have a conversation with your healthcare team. Again, because there will be paperwork, you just want to pay attention to what is being disclosed. There's very specific questions oftentimes your healthcare providers will have to answer. And you may decide just to target answering the questions specifically as they have it written to disclose just the right amount of information without disclosing too much information. So have that key conversation with your healthcare team because also their responses could be written in a way that allows for more flexibility if you need it. Again, wanting to disclose the right amount of information, but not too much. You want to provide relevant documentation if needed. We want to provide specifically what they are asking for. We don't necessarily need to provide anything extra, right? That's why it's important to review that accommodation process. I know over here at SAS, when we work with students, sometimes we'll receive a stack of documentation and we'll go through it, we'll peruse it to make sure that we're mining it for all pertinent information. That works in the education setting, right? But once you move over to employment, you do want to be mindful of your privacy, your own confidentiality, and only provide the specific documentation that's needed. We don't have to provide anything in addition to that unless it's asked for and there's a specific reason as to why it's needed. And again, even if more documentation is asked for, you can ask yourself, do I need to provide this? How does this help the process? Be open to suggesting solutions and tools. We don't know what each company may have access to. The accommodations are going to be individualized to you. Some of them will be very innovative, right? You may go in with one thought of accommodations that you might need, and HR team or the ADA coordinator there may have other ideas for accommodations that may work for you. So come in with an open mind of knowing what needs to be met, but how the need might be met could be different, right? So come open to suggestions and also hearing suggestions from the team as well. And then always practice that self-advocacy, right? And really focus that conversation on your skill set, your ability to do the job that you can meet those essential functions of the role. But sometimes some accommodations are needed to be able to assist, but focus it again on you being the right candidate, you were hired, and that you are the right person for the role and that you can do the role. Drew, hate to put you on the spot, but you had some really good feedback. Is there anything you would like to share in addition to that? Because you opened up about that interactive process.
Yeah, so again, I would just kind of reiterate that you're familiarizing yourself with the prospective company's process of requesting accommodations and that you're comfortable in what exactly would be requested of you. So you're only submitting what is needed in that kind of interactive process to determine reasonableness of the accommodation in the workplace. I would also strongly, encourage all of you who are thinking, like, oh, what does it look like if I request this accommodation? Are my employers going to think less of me? Obviously, working in the world that I work in, that is not the perspective that I take. That is not the perspective that anyone in SAS takes, or your kind folks in career services. So we would encourage you to think critically about what it means for you to be or to have a good fit with a prospective employer, and then work to translate that into what kind of environment maybe, or what kind of duties that would call for you to encounter on a regular basis. I used to work at my previous position with students who would be more actively considering workplace accommodations. And even something as switching their overhead lights off because the individual that I was working with had chronic migraine syndrome. If they were not expected to work under overhead lighting, they saw a reduction in their symptoms. That is an example of an accommodation that costs your employer nothing. It actually saves them. And it makes you feel more comfortable in that space. It may make you less likely, or for this individual, less likely to experience symptoms that would call for them to not be able to work or to have to call in sick. So think critically about what it means to have a good fit with your employer. Also use that job, the JAN network, the resource that was, I believe, in the last slide, if it's still up here. That's a great resource to think about what accommodations might make sense for you as an individual who might present with a particular diagnosis. Obviously, not every accommodation is warranted for every person with a diagnosis, but what that resource does is allow you to see what might be considered a reasonable accommodation. And you can begin thinking critically, would that help me in this environment? Would that allow me to better be able to fulfill the job duties as outlined?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Drew. So when you have an opportunity, as you mentioned, yes, please check out what we call JAN, the Job Accommodation Network. You could search on that website by disability type to have ideas of some accommodations that might be helpful. And again, it's not a one size fits all. So some accommodations listed on there may work for you, and others may not. But just peruse through the list. It will also give you information about being in the workforce. It will give you information about that interactive process. So this is a really good tool to help you have that foundational knowledge of what you're needing to move forward in the workplace environment. And then I also have on here, and unfortunately, I'm sorry, I got my dates crossed. This event actually closed. They just had a session, the ADA Network on disclosure and how to disclose, considerations for disclosing, some pros and cons. That session ended on the 14th, but I do believe they record their sections where it says that ADA Network, and they have more sessions and webinars that they offer, and they are free of charge. Most of them are free of charge. So that's another good resource that you could use to help you prepare for moving into that employment environment. And back to you, John.
All right, great. Well, we talked a little bit about setting goals, and that's one thing to just kind of say that. But I want to make sure people have the knowledge about the idea of a SMART goal. So this is a lot more helpful instead of I need a job. And then it can be very overwhelming if you just look at that like, hey, I don't have a job. What's going on? The idea of a SMART goal is really important. One, it helps you make things much more focused, much more like accessible to take care of different steps at a time instead of a giant mountain of something that may feel like it's not possible. Um, so real quickly, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And we have here an example or two of some what a SMART goal might look like, where it's much more a step along the way instead of something giant. So I just like to make sure to share this anytime I'm talking about a job search because it is setting a goal. I need a job, but there's a lot of smaller steps that you can do along the way to help you manage that much larger task. So, one of the main tasks that I encourage is I meet with students every day for job search, and this is one of the main things. We did already have a specific full presentation in this series earlier in October on resumes, but I did want to revisit it here just in case maybe somebody was not able to attend that one and because of the importance of a good resume in the job search process. So, the resume is going to be your opportunity to share your experiences, your knowledge, your skills with an employer. And that's going to be again, what are my strengths? What are my skills? What are my abilities that you have already reflected on, hopefully? And this is you actually putting it onto paper or onto electronic paper and being able to share that to others. Which is the core of what you're doing in a job search is showing your abilities to potential employers. A few of the basics on a format is make sure it is simple. Don't pick something flashy, don't pick something dramatic. You want very simple, typed out, no typos, watch for grammatical errors, don't include photos, and then avoid some of the design elements like tables, columns, graphics, any of those sorts of things. Make it very simple. You want to make sure in your documents that you're targeting it to the job, that you're trying to showcase some of your accomplishments. Maybe not what any software developer student at ACC or any cashier at Target has done, but what did you do individually? And then make sure you're showing skills. Some of them may be what we call transferable skills, your communication abilities, maybe your organizational skills. How well do you solve problems when they come up? Or it could be something more technical. Pretty much everybody is coming here to ACC to learn something new. And you want to think about, what am I learning in school? What sort of projects am I doing? What sort of new skills am I learning? Because that's what you're going to want to show to an employer as well. Overall, with this, you're wanting to focus on those professional strengths, show why you are a good fit for a job. That's why targeting it can be really good. And then making sure just to talk about and show, what unique value do I bring to a position? What do I bring to this role? That's going to be key in conducting a good job search. And it may change a little bit depending on the job. You may emphasize very different parts of yourself if you're looking at a sales role versus one for an educator role. Two very different sets of skills. You may even use a lot of the same communication skills and things like that, but you're applying them in a different way. So it really does help to target it. Like I said, we did have that resume workshop earlier, and every day the specialists like myself meet with students. So I would definitely encourage you, schedule an appointment with us one on one. We can help you with that. I'll show you at the end of the presentation how you can access our services to schedule with us. All right. And then a couple of basic logistics. These are some things I see happen quite often when I'm meeting with students. So some things to do before you start. These are really common mistakes that can really hold you back in your job search process. Make sure that you have a professional email address. Your school email can work well. It's also very easy to do something like first name dot last name at gmail.com. Very simple. And also make sure that you have some way to receive messages on your phone, typically a voicemail setup. Doing a professional one is usually nice, but if that's not possible, at least have a way to receive a message if you miss a call on your phone. Make sure that your resume is complete. Usually you're going to make it in something like Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and then you submit a copy of your resume as a PDF to an employer. Make sure that it's complete, make sure it's free of typos and everything, and make sure when you're uploading your resume in your application, or make sure if you print it, sometimes you still use paper ones, make sure you have the right file. If you're sending it in, make sure you have something like your name and resume for the file name. If you just send an employer resume, they've probably already received 80 resumes. So it can be much harder for them to review that sort of information. When you're applying, most applications are going to be done online. Sometimes you're given a paper application. It is very, very important that you complete that entire application. Don't leave things blank. Don't say, see resume, because the application is part of the process of getting the job. So make sure you treat that with the time that you need to take. Know that some may be very quick and easy, some may be very involved. So don't try to throw an application in 5 minutes before you jump into a class, before you go to your current job or anything like that. Set some time aside, make sure you can get that done well. It's also a good idea to save a copy of that job posting and the resume that you submitted. That way you can go back and refer once you hopefully get an interview. What job am I interviewing for? because you're probably applying to a lot of jobs. So you want to make sure you can see what are they asking for this position and what did I say about this. Sometimes there can be some delay in between job applying for a job and getting an interview. Some places may call you back in a week or two. Some may call you back in a month or two. So it can vary quite a bit depending on the employer. And then once you've already submitted the application and as you're applying to jobs, make sure to check your email, check your spam folder, check your voicemail. Employers reach out in different ways. And it's very careful to not just skim over it. Make sure you're fully reading, fully understanding what they're asking you to do for the next steps or when they might be scheduling an interview. Often there may be things like you need to schedule the interview time. You may need to have assessments that are due. There may be extra things along the way, and you want to make sure you don't miss those because that can set a very negative tone if you're not following instructions. Something that you want to do again as a plan is knowing what you're looking for. Make sure to think about what sort of titles am I interested in. If you are going into something like maybe software developer, then you may search by the title of what your major is. It's software development, great. Sometimes you may need to branch out. Often, software developer is a higher level. Many students may start out as something like a quality assurance tester, and that would be the title that you might want to start searching for. Others may not even be at all. I'm a sociologist by training, but I've never had a job that was called sociologist. I've done much more things in the realm of human services and case management. That may change a lot. So it's important to know what am I looking for? What are the names of those? We have a lot of resources here in career service to help you with finding what are some of those titles, what's a good entry level for my career. And that's very much a one-on-one sort of thing. Where do I look? Typically you're going to be searching and applying online. You may also be able to do something at a job fair. That's another great way to find job leads. It's a way to network with others and employers. However, when it's time to actually submit an application, you're usually doing that online through a job board, or what tends to be the best is actually applying on a company career page. Boards like Indeed, Handshake, LinkedIn are job posting boards. They're not necessarily going to be I mean, they do hire employees, but that's not generally what people are looking for. So if you can find the position you're interested in a company career page, that is a much more reliable method. Handshake's a pretty solid one to apply through. But for most other cases, I really encourage students, if you find a posting from Tesla on Indeed, I would go to Tesla's career page and apply in that system rather than through Indeed. And then what are a few of the things I should notice when you're reading a job posting? There is no common consensus from employers on what goes into a job posting. Some may be very informative, some may be very brief. If you find one that has some information, try to look for things like what are the qualifications or requirements. That's the things that they're looking for from an employee, or some of the things that they may require an employee bring to the position. It's important to look at things like posting dates or closing dates. You have to make sure that you apply before a closing date. And a posting date can be important. If it's a brand new job, that's a much more likely chance than if you find a posting that's been open for 10 months. That could be a little bit of a concern. And then, of course, some of your personal needs. Do they share information about pay, about hours, about where the work location is going to be? Those are all things that you would want to know. Not every position is going to list that. So sometimes you do have to approach it without all of that information. But if they share it, definitely worthwhile to know. You don't want to find a perfect job that works for you and then realize, oh, this is based out of New York. That's probably not going to work for me. I do want to mention briefly our job board handshake. Very useful tool. We have a lot of good resources available through this and a lot of good positions. especially if somebody might be looking for something like an internship. This is going to be the best tool that you have available to you. It has a great profile system where you can really tell about yourself and what your needs are. So it helps you kind of curate a lot of that stuff for your job search as you're setting up the profile, or if you need to adjust it later. Where do I want to work? What sort of titles am I interested in? What type of work am I looking for? You share some of your background, almost like you might put on a resume, and it gives you more results based off of relevancy to your experiences. um, that career profile. There's a job and internship search. We have our events tab where we list the career service events, our informational sessions, our job fairs that we host. You can message employers on the system. You can connect with others, peers in the higher education community. So it's not just at ACC, other schools also use Handshake. And it's also a mobile app. I'm working on it, so I use it here on the computer, but for students, it's great being able to actually functionally use a job posting board on your phone. So definitely a great resource. The link is here for anybody who would be interested, and it will also be on our website, which I'll show you how to access here at the end of the meeting. But Handshake's not the only tool. That's obviously the one we try to promote, but there's a lot of different options out there. So LinkedIn can be a very common one for doing networking, for searching for jobs, for having a professional presence online. Google Jobs, there's actually a jobs tab in Google. It's a fantastic tool to use if you are looking for a very specific job title in a specific location. If you're just looking for a retail job, you might get a little too much results. But if you know specifically what you want, it can be very helpful. Indeed is definitely a very large scale job board. There's lots of positions that get posted on there. And then finally, there are a lot of specialized boards for all numbers of topics, including any students that may have disabilities or that have certain needs, like maybe they need a flexible hours, maybe they need support along the way. This next slide here has some options. There's far too many for me to go through and walk through in our time today. I've already talked about the kind of top ones here, but there are so many different specialized employment boards where they really do address different needs that students may have. Lots of good resources. So definitely, I would encourage people to check this out later, explore it a little bit more on your own. In addition to those individualized job boards, there are a lot of good resources out here that, again, I would definitely encourage people go back and explore some of these later on. Job Accommodation Network is one of the big ones. There are so many good resources for people who may have the need for accommodations. It breaks it down very thoroughly. I've spent some time exploring that one. Career One Stop is just a mountain of resources as well for any sorts of different students, not just for those with disabilities. So I would encourage you guys to spend some time exploring some of these in the future on your own. And then finally, because there are a lot of changes going on in the world, it's good to mention, AI for your job search. There's a lot of different ways that you can utilize this individually. you know Researching can be good. It's a large language model, so it pulls information very efficiently, but you have to make sure you're prompting it well. Making sure that you can research about what are companies providing, what does company culture look like, what are some new roles that might be coming out in the future, what are some job trends as you decide what type of job am I searching for. You want to see what's out there. It can really be a very good tool if you want to target your resume, if you want to build a cover letter to a specific job. So maybe build a draft resume, put that in, and ask it to build a resume for a specific job posting that you then put into the AI. Can be a really great tool. There's a lot of different ways you can use it for assisting with your job application process, with helping you get reminders on things, may help you stay on track for your goals. And then finally, just making sure you can use it for your confidence, like reflecting on your strengths, your experiences. We sit down, meet with students with that, but they can also be good to have a conversation here with the computer system like this to help you see some of the things you may not see yourself. What are some of your strengths? What are some of your experiences that maybe you're not noticing immediately? So those are all really good uses for how you can use that AI system, various ones, for your job search. And then, of course, later on, we are going to be having the full reverse job fair coming up. So definitely, I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a moment. And then, of course, career services. So if you have some more in-depth questions about some of the things that you have seen today, how can I get ready for my job search? How can I make sure my resume is all good? How can I review what are my strengths and abilities? We meet with students one-on-one, virtually, in person, on campus, whatever their case may be. We'll meet with you, help you with that process, and get you the coaching to get you ready for your job search and your career. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that we can open the floor to questions. Does anybody have any questions for any of the team here?
So I won't be here next